Manchester, and welcome to another edition of Girard at Large. I am your pre-election host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. As you know, you can find us online at girardatlarge.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Twitter, also at Girard at Large, where we encourage you to like us and to follow us. Why? Well, we've been lobbing some grenades out there on social media for all to see and have fun with. The stakes are pretty high in this election. And so we're participating in ways that we haven't participated in a while. And I am now, well, I can't say I'm tanned, rested, or ready after being away from you last week. But as you know, if you watched the show to the final conclusion the week before, you know that I wasn't with you last week because my eldest daughter, Colette, went off and got herself married. And so we were busy about the business of celebrating our daughter's wedding. It was a wonderful time, unbelievable event, and well, it's a little weird to walk your daughter down the aisle. Where does the time go? But anyway, now that we're back, we are in the saddle, and there's a whole lot. Of course, before I came back, or yeah, I guess it would be before I came back, you may have read an op-ed piece that I've had published in the New Hampshire Sunday News, which, as you know, comes out on Saturday now. And it was all about the race for governor here in the state of New Hampshire and how the Never Trump movement is endangering the election of Kelly Ayotte as governor. Now, we have a lot of local news, a lot of Manchester stuff that we're going to get to tonight. But we'll start with the elections because they are top of mind and, of course, the big topic, but there are some really big local things happening, and we will get to them. So, I mean, I've made no secret of my distaste for Kelly Ayotte, and that is not something that I have lost. However, primaries are for the party faithful to go and make their choice. My choice was not nominated by the party. That was Chuck Morse. And taking a look at how this campaign is unfolding, I think Chuck Morse would have been the better person to run against Joyce Craig, because Chuck Morse is not only conservative, but he is competent, and he knows state government like very few others do, and he just would have made so much of what Joyce Craig is talking about look like the silly gibberish it is. But that's not the case. Kelly Ayotte is the Republican nominee, and for the things that I do not like about Kelly Ayotte, they are miles ahead of the things that I don't like about Joyce Craig. And of course, here in the Queen City, we understand all too well what Joyce Craig is about. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that today as the Republican Party continues to hammer away at Craigville and talking about her record here. You know, it's kind of interesting. She's got a couple new TV commercials out, which I caught on Twitter. And I find it really fascinating. On one hand, she says she's not, she's not for a sales or income tax. She won't support a sales or income tax ever. But literally is campaigning to reinstate the income tax that New Hampshire did have, which was on the interest from your savings account or the dividends from your investments. It was called the dividends or interest and dividends tax. Frankly, it's a nasty tax. It's a penalty on savings, and it particularly penalizes our senior citizens. Over 70,000 of those tax returns get filed every year. I see a lot of that in my business as an investment advisor, so I'm forever looking for investments for clients who have healthy dividend returns that are not subject to the New Hampshire state income tax. There are some, there are few, and some of them are pretty good. But that being said, it's an ominous tax for people who've scrimped and saved and otherwise done well with their investing. So if you've got CDs that are earning money, which they are today, money market accounts, or just dividends that come from stocks or bonds, that's income. It's passive income, but it's income. And New Hampshire has done away with that tax effective December 31st, 2024. But Joyce Craig is campaigning to reimpose that tax because somehow, in getting rid of that tax, we're letting big corporations not pay their fair share of taxes here in the Granite State. Of course, there have been any number of studies that have been published showing just how many normal Granite Staters, not wealthy big corporations, who actually pay this tax. But Joyce Craig, who campaigns against a sales or income tax, is for reinstating the tax that the Republican legislature and Governor Sununu have phased out over the last 3 to 4 years. And that would reimpose a $160 million tax annually on the people of New Hampshire. I can think of a lot better things for the people of New Hampshire to do with that $160 million than the government. But Joyce Craig wants to bring that back. Of course, the other thing that Joyce Craig is doing, and we're gonna chit-chat about this, because again, as you know, I'm no fan of Kelly Ayotte, but there is no question in my mind that Kelly Ayotte must become governor. And it's the reason why I wrote that op-ed, which if you didn't see it, I haven't posted it to Girard at Large yet because it came out the weekend that I was away. So I will link it to, and I forgot for my Facebook friends who are looking for it tonight, I forgot my phone, so I can't do the Facebook Live, but I'll put the video of this show up, and I'll link to it, and I'll put it up at Girard at Large so you can see the op-ed. But here's the rub, okay? The Never Trumpers in this state are an exceptionally loud and large group, and frankly, since most of them haven't voted Republican in God knows how long, I think they're also a nasty group. But that having been said, they on one hand complain bitterly that Donald Trump is sinking the ticket in New Hampshire. But on the other hand, they're actively campaigning to sink Donald Trump and make him a bigger drag on the ticket than he otherwise would be. And Ayotte's campaign has been an unusual repository of these people. The Never Trumpers coalesced around her in the primary. Chuck Morse was very vocal in his support for Donald Trump. Ayotte said nothing until after he won the primary, after which she courageously endorsed him. And I might have even waited until he had won the nomination to do it. But the problem is now you've got these Never Trumpers out there saying, well, the bigger the win for Harris here in the state of New Hampshire, the more likely it is that Joyce Craig will win. And I think the Harris campaign sees this because they are spending a crap ton of money here in the state, TV, digital ads. They're everywhere. You would almost think that New Hampshire's in play for the Democrats, but it really, based on the polling that I've seen, Trump maybe has an outside shot because he's down 7, 8, 9 points here. But it's given the trouble she's got in other actual real battleground states, the fact that they're spending as much money in New Hampshire as they are is a bit of a strange thing, unless you believe that what they're trying to do in New Hampshire is one of 2 legislatures nationwide that Democrat organizations are trying to flip. So that between the Democratic governors, the Harris campaign, and the Democratic state legislative committees, there is like 9 figures, there's easily $100 million coming into this state to try to flip it from red to blue. And so the Never Trumpers, though, they're contributing to this, because if they're concerned about the gap between Trump and Harris here in the state, then they ought to be working to close it, which of course they aren't. It's almost a week doesn't go by where you don't open up the Union Leader and see another group of disaffected Republicans for Harris. And they're actively out there campaigning against the top of the ticket, while at the same time complaining that drag is hurting Ayotte and the rest of the candidates down ballot. It's a weird thing to do, so I thought I would call it out. And see if I could get some of these Never Trumpers to understand that they are their own worst enemy on this one, because what they really should be doing, look, Kamala Harris, whatever you think of her, is an imbecile. And she's simply come on. If there's anyone out there, 603-698-3233, if you can call into this into this show, I'll give you all the airtime you want to make the case for Kamala Harris and why she'd be a great president. I'll gladly listen while you try. But there isn't anybody, let's be honest, who really believes that she is presidential material. We'll put it that way. And yet the Democrats have closed ranks because they understand that the failure to present a unified front for their ticket means not only will they lose the top of the ticket, but they will suffer the down ballot consequences. And the Republicans oddly seem not to understand this, and they continue to campaign against the top of the ticket, all while complaining the top of the ticket that they're helping to sabotage is causing down ballot problems. So the simple solution here is to wake up and go, you know what? For as much as I don't like Donald Trump, I have the opportunity to see what happened during his 4 years as president, on foreign policy, the economy, trade, justices, and a whole range of issues that these alleged Republicans who call themselves never Trumpers should be in favor of the results that were had by the Trump administration. And I get to lay it right down next to the people who came in afterward. So you got a side by each comparison, as we might say on the side of town I grew up on. You got them side by each. And if you got them side by each and you can clearly contrast, all of the different results that each of them have gotten, it really shouldn't be a contest. And so, Trump, no matter what, may not win the state of New Hampshire, but if Republicans close rank around Trump and they do battle on the record that he had versus the record that Harris has amassed during her time in public life, it's a pretty shut and open and closed case. And if the more you close that gap at the top, the better off Ayotte's going to be, and the better off the chances that the Republicans are going to hold on to the House of Representatives are going to be. But this basic strategy seems to have eluded Republicans who will, like Captain Ahab, fire their hearts upon the whale Donald Trump to try to kill their nemesis, but in the process, they're just killing themselves. And so I recommend that. Of course, the other part of the article were the concerns, and I want to address this with my pro-life friends, and all I can say is, I feel you. I really do. I am among those who wish that Trump's rhetoric on abortion were more in line with his record as the president. I understand what he's trying to do, and we need to understand that Donald Trump has not gone soft on the question of abortion. Donald Trump is reading the lay of the land. And for as much now as Roe has been done away with, we can't now turn around and demand that the people who are running for office have to be in favor of a national abortion ban. Let's understand what overturning Roe versus Wade meant. It meant that it is not a matter for the federal government to be involved in. It is one of those 10th Amendment issues that are left to the states. And it's the people of the states now that are going to hold these decisions in their hands. And you might think that's right, you might think that's wrong, but it is what it is, and it's part of what our constitutional republic is set up to do. Now, for 50 plus years, we've heard this called women's health care, reproductive health care. We've heard it called anything but what it is, which is the murder of unborn children in the womb. Okay? It's a woman's right to choose, and I go through this in the article. But the upshot is this. For over 50 years, the propaganda has been different than the reality. And for as much as we, on the life side of the issue, understand that what's really at stake. A woman has, should have control over her own body. Yes, she should, but we need to recognize that the baby has its own body. And while it is for 9 months contained within the woman's body, that's just, gestation, it is not the woman's body. It is the baby's body. But this has not been thought of. And so we are not going to win this issue at the state level or especially the federal level if we don't first win the hearts and minds of our fellow citizens. And to do that, we need to help them understand the issue the way that we do. It is going to be a long and arduous task. And anybody who thinks that we're just simply going to get a national abortion ban passed anytime in the near future is delusional. And I think the Republican Party and the pro-life movement, since the Dobbs decision overturned Roe versus Wade, have both shown themselves to be unprepared for the eventuality and ill-prepared to address it. And so we are going to have to just continue to grind it out. There is no Hail Mary pass here. We're going to have to help people understand what's really at stake. And we're going to have to help educate them in ways that we haven't yet had to do because it was a moot point as long as the Supreme Court said, well, this is the law of the land. Now, Joyce Craig, and this is part of how we need to do it, right? So Joyce Craig is out there campaigning saying, we need to expand reproductive rights in New Hampshire. And Democrat organizations all over the place are running these ads saying, New Hampshire is the only state that doesn't protect abortion in New England. Okay, so first we need to understand what the law in New Hampshire is. And I can tell you, having knocked on doors in 2022 in the immediate aftermath of New Hampshire's law being passed, there are a lot of people out there who still think that New Hampshire has an abortion ban. So let's start there. New Hampshire does not. In fact, New Hampshire is one of the most radically pro-abortion states in America, and which makes it one of the most radically pro-abortion places on the face of the earth. And I'm not overstating that. So in New Hampshire, we license in New Hampshire every medical facility in the state, except abortion clinics. We have oversight by the State Department of Health and Human Services on every medical facility in the state, except an abortion clinic. We collect procedural information done by any medical facility in the state on every procedure done, except abortion. So when people tell you that New Hampshire, is a restrictive state, well, let's start with licensing. There is no licensing, there is no oversight, there is no data collection, anonymously or otherwise, in the state of New Hampshire. So, before Roe versus Wade was overturned, New Hampshire, or before our law was put into place, New Hampshire was what was called a place of abortion tourism, because states that did ban late-term abortion, women would come here to have them done. Now, the left will tell you, oh, well, that doesn't happen very often. But they, at every opportunity, have opposed literally every piece of legislation that was designed to collect that data and to subject these facilities to, licensing and oversight and standards of operation, just like, we do for your dentist office, okay? Or any walk-in clinic. I mean, there's no regulation or oversight there whatsoever. Now, in terms of what New Hampshire allows or doesn't allow, you can have an abortion if you're a woman in the state of New Hampshire with no questions asked for the first 6 months. You can take a baby up to 24 weeks and kill it here in the state of New Hampshire, even though at 24 weeks it's viable outside of the womb. There are no restrictions. There is no interference. There is nothing here in the state of New Hampshire, nothing to terminate any pregnancy whatsoever. It's a horrifying thing. And up until our late-term abortion ban passed in 2022, it was up until the moment of birth. So the law that passed here in the state of New Hampshire said, yeah, no, day 1 of month 7, you're done. Can't do an abortion now, except if the mother has if there's a threat to the a mortal threat to the life of the mother, or if there is what's called a fatal fetal anomaly. And I'll tell you, I have trouble with that one because I've known people whose children were diagnosed with a fatal fetal anomaly, and they're perfectly healthy, normal kids today. So medicine isn't always right, But that being said, and the whole idea that, you have to have an exception for the life of the mother. If you really understand the science and you understand the pro-life position, no pro-life person that I have ever known has ever said that the woman on pain of death must give birth to that child. That's not the way it works. The way it works is if the mother's got a condition, mother's got cancer, have to have an abortion. No, actually, that's not true. You always first and foremost treat the mother for whatever the mother needs to be treated for. And if in doing so, the unborn child is a casualty of that treatment, that is a sad and tragic thing, but it is not an abortion, okay? That is not an abortion. If you have an ectopic pregnancy, meaning the baby is growing outside of the womb, that is not an abortion because it is not actually a viable pregnancy, okay? So a lot of the things that people bring up are just red flags that are designed to make you think that people who are pro-life are somehow anti-women or somehow cruel and uncaring people. We always stand for life, first and foremost the mother's, and the mother gets whatever treatment the mother needs, and if the baby's a casualty, then so be it. But you never need to kill the child to treat the mother. That is a canard, and I'm just going to lay it bare for what it is, a lie. And then you've got these ads running attacking Kelly Ayotte for her national abortion ban. And women saying that they had miscarriages, and if Kelly Ayotte had her way, they wouldn't be able to have, the miscarriage somehow addressed by an abortion. I'm not exactly sure how that works because miscarrying means you've lost the baby. And if there's a reason for a surgical intervention, the state of New Hampshire law does not, nor did anything on the federal level, would not interfere with that. The child is not alive, so there is no abortion to be done. So these are just the dishonest tactics that are being used against Kelly Ayotte by the left. And now you have Joyce Craig, who wants to expand reproductive rights here in the state of New Hampshire. So presumably, she wants to go back to the way it was, where up until the moment of birth, you can kill the child. And since New Hampshire does not have what's called born alive legislation, if a child survives an abortion attempt, there are many states that say, yeah, no, okay, you tried, you failed. Now you've got to provide life-saving care for this, for the child who survived the abortion. Yeah, New Hampshire doesn't have that law. So presumably in New Hampshire, if Joyce Craig were to get her way, you could have post-birth abortion, where, as the governor of Virginia, former governor of Virginia once said, well, you will just set the baby aside and keep it comfortable until it's gone. That's the position of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, the candidate for vice president under Kamala Harris, who shares the radical view that abortion should be on demand up until the moment of birth. But Tim Walz actually signed legislation that overturned the born alive laws in Minnesota to allow, and apparently there have been several children who have died after birth as a result of this law in the state of Minnesota. I believe there were a dozen last year because they repealed any and all protections in Minnesota for children in the womb and some children who were born who, no longer are required to receive life-saving care after birth. Isn't that atrocious? That's what's at stake here in this election for governor. And, it's okay because we have, Democrats like Julie Smith and Jessica Grill in Ward 12 who want to protect reproductive rights. And then, here's a caution. So to my pro-life friends, to tie the loop on this, look, whatever your concerns about Donald Trump may be on the life issue, Donald Trump is campaigning as a guy who knows that if he's going to push abortion bans and restrictions, he's going to lose independent women voters that he needs in key states. It's just the way it is. And the more you give the Democrats the ability to make abortion the #1 focused issue, which Trump has been very good at depriving them of, they have to flat out lie about every single one of the positions that he has on abortion. Flat, they're making it up, they're lying about it, it just is what it is. They're doing the same thing to Kelly Ayotte. And if you allow that to, discourage you from voting for Donald Trump, then what you're doing is you're enabling this radical abortion agenda to take over the conversation and elect people like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and Joyce Craig, among others, who will stop at nothing to make sure that any child in the womb can be killed for whatever reason, their defenseless innocence notwithstanding. And so this is bleeding, of course, into the first congressional district race between Chris Pappas and Russell Prescott. Now, Russell Prescott is one of these sort of moderate guys who got in trouble with a lot of pro-lifers because as an executive counselor, he voted to fund Planned Parenthood. Okay? That does not make me happy as a pro-life guy. Okay? However, guys like Russell Prescott, whatever they may say their reasons for doing it are, is to, keep that sort of independent, moderate, I'm not anti-women, but it will never be enough. Here's a Chris Pappas attack piece. He's endorsed, of course, by Planned Parenthood. I'm tempted to say something about that, but I won't. But going after Russell Prescott as anti-women, radical pro-lifer, radical anti-choicer, radical anti-woman. But here's a guy who actually has voted to use your tax dollars to fund Planned Parenthood. And what's he get? He gets treated just like everybody else who is pro-life because it's not enough that he is, willing to do that. Nope. 20-year record of voting against a woman's freedom to choose. Really? What do you call funding Planned Parenthood? Is that a 20-year record? I don't know. He backs the ruling that allows states to ban abortion, no exceptions. That would be the Dobbs ruling that gave the states the ability to come up with their own laws, God forbid. And then they perpetuate this lie that, he wants to allow the government to monitor pregnancies. This is literally something made up of whole cloth. They blame it on something called Project 2025. Project 2025 does not say anything like that at all. At all. None of the advertising you've seen from the Democrats on Project 2025 is true. And you can look it up and read it yourself. Now, you're not going to read all 900 pages, but you might have issues that you're concerned about, or you might want to fact check the commercials that you're seeing. And because the Project 2025 is broken down very easily and simply into issue areas, you can pretty much find what you're looking for and take care of it. So that's the latest from the campaign trail. You can go to unionleader.com, go to the opinion pages, look for the op-eds. You'll find mine there. I will post it up on my website and social media for you to read if you'd like to. If you are a never Trumper or you know another Trumper, folks, this is really, listen, and I addressed this in the article. There are a lot of things that Donald Trump says that I wish he wouldn't, because I think it takes away from the winning issues that allow people to come together. Okay, but you can't make the perfect the enemy of the good, and there's nothing good that comes from a Kamala Harris presidency. If you think the last 4 years have been, fun, give it another 4 with her, and you won't recognize the country, which, of course, if you've been paying attention, you shouldn't recognize at this moment in time. All right, turning ourselves now to what's happening here in the Queen City. Anyone wants to call, of course, we always welcome your calls. Where do I start? Well, I'm going to start with a piece of good news. In doing so, I'm going to say this came out, I would have addressed it last week, and I did not have a chance to kind of do all the normal follow-up I would, but you might recall there's a place up there in Ward 12 called Hackett Hill. And over the years, Hackett Hill has, that was developed in the 90s, the mid-90s. The idea was to create sort of like a corporate research park, and there have been all kinds of grand designs up there. But there's been a big problem up there, and it's the traffic, it's accessibility, right? Because exit 7 is not a full exit, and traveling Front Street to get to exit 6 ain't no picnic. So a lot of the types of things that the city back in the 90s envisioned hasn't really materialized despite varying levels of effort to market the property, because traffic access is just not good. Of course, you have this enormous project that hopefully remains in the state's 10-year plan and gets funded, but that remains to be seen. That said, United Therapeutics, which is a big part of the Army project, that's Dean Kamen's bio regeneration project in the Mill Yard, which Joyce Craig is taking credit for, by the way, in her TV ads. Were it not for Joyce Craig, we wouldn't have all these high-tech jobs thanks to the Army project. I'm pretty sure Dean Kamen had a little bit more to do with it than Joyce Craig, who also took credit for 2,000 housing units being developed in the city of Manchester. Of course, we could get into all kinds of detail on that, but we just don't have time. But United Therapeutics, which is currently renovating something like 100,000 square feet down in the mill yard at a cost of $26 million because of their part of the Army project, wants to buy 350 acres of land, something like 10 parcels up there, on Hackett Hill so they can build a facility that is focused on this bioregeneration stuff. And that came before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. They'd buy the land for a little more than $4.5 million. And I wish I knew exactly how it came out of those discussions, but that is a pretty big deal, that 300, and that's exactly what that park was made for. And over the years, you know, the city's chipped away at it as politically connected developers like SOOH have come forward, and the aldermen have made zoning changes so that they can start to sort of piece by piece convert what was set aside for this corporate research type of development and start turning into high, you know, more high density rental housing, which they've taken 35 to 50 acres of that land. And I'm sure there were pitches coming for other pieces, but hopefully, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen stepped up and said 350 acre development of high-tech stuff that will help solidify Manchester's place as a leader in bioregeneration technology. Yay! Woohoo! 350 acres of land. That's a really big development, and that would very nicely, not only meet the vision that was established back in the 90s when that when that park was created, but it will solidify Manchester's place as in the forefront of the bioregeneration that's coming. So that's really, really exciting stuff. And by the way, this is what you really want to wait for, and it's coming. So we got we have an interesting development coming to the downtown now. As you know, we've talked at length here on this show about sober living facilities in their place in the city. And one of the things that neighborhoods all over the city have been beset by are these operators who illegally and knowingly, by the way, I may be heading over to the zoning board after this show tonight, but who illegally and knowingly open up these flop houses that they call sober homes, which they really aren't. I mean, don't have time to go down that rabbit hole today, but there is actually an organization that is looking for, it's called Live Free Recovery Services, and they're actually looking to do it the right way. And I have mixed feelings about this because it involves a pretty significant property in the downtown. B, you want to zoom in on that photo for me? That property used to be a dormitory for the New Hampshire Institute of Art. You might recognize right here in the front, that is the original Manchester High School, which was acquired by the New Hampshire Institute of Art, and they built that very flashy, modern, nice building behind it. And they want to take over that property and turn it into 55 units of recovery housing. And I have to tell you, for the fact that that's a big project, and I would have some concerns about it being in that area of the downtown, I do think it's an appropriate place for it to go because the physical infrastructure necessary to support those people in their recovery and the level of activity that that building will have are a good fit for that area, okay? Ideally, you'd want a property like that to go to what might be considered a higher and better use economically in terms of economic development, impact, taxes, the type of economic activity. And so there is always the question of whether or not it could be put to a higher and better use. That said, we do know that we have an issue with drug abuse. We do know that we need more recovery facilities. And this is a place where it can go, where the activity, the coming and the going and the turnover of people who live there and the facilities to support them, whether it's parking or access to any of the nonprofits or anything that are downtown. I actually think this is a good fit. It was going before the zoning board. Was it the zoning board or the planning board? I forget which. But this is one of those things that, you kind of look at it and you say, finally, they got a location that makes some sense. It's not across the street from Central High School. It's not smack dab in the middle of residential neighborhoods. It's not in places that are disruptive to the surrounding area. And so I actually hope that goes through, because I think a high-profile project like that will be better run, better maintained, and better operated than almost anything that's going on in the city today, where people are trying to do it under radar, trying not to get caught, trying to accuse neighbors of being, hate-filled, discriminatory people who just don't care about addicts in recovery, et cetera, and all that comes with it is there. So this could be sort of like a marquee development, and hopefully will lead to more operators looking for more spaces that, like it, are appropriate to the cause. Of course, the funny thing is while we're talking about all of this housing and the need for housing, headline story on Tuesday's paper, New Hampshire home market may be softening, realtors say. Look, I called this, years ago when everyone was, pushing, saying we need all this affordable housing, and they were preparing to spend, tens of millions of dollars to develop paltry numbers of affordable. Whenever they say affordable housing, remember, your knee-jerk reaction should be government subsidized, because it all is. But now the market definitely is softening, as someone who is a property owner and somebody who does, assess this stuff constantly on an ongoing basis. Happens to be a personal interest of mine, and it also happens to be a professional need of mine, given that real estate markets and investment markets are closely tied. One does affect the other. It's something that I stay in touch with, and it's, the interest rates, we haven't seen it as much in our area because the demand for housing here is so high, but clearly some of the big projects, Joyce's, the big project on Wellington Hill that was going to have over 300 apartment units built up on Wellington Hill. Yeah, that thing has stalled because of financing issues that have arisen with the rise in interest rates. We've seen the proposals on for the Pearl Street lot and the Hartnett Street lot. They are no longer going to be market rate developments. They are going to be 100% subsidized. They're going to be much more expensive, even though they're going to be a lot slower, because the developer, Peter Flotz, from the Melbourne Lansing Group, who lavished cash on Joyce Craig's election campaigns, and by the way, tossed a fair amount at Jay Rouet too. Suddenly the financing to do the private side of the development isn't so great. So now they're not going to do that. They've turned it over to Southern New Hampshire NeighborWorks. It's going to develop, what I'm sure will be a lovely, ultra low income housing development at both of those lots. So that's a concern, by the way, with this. New Hampshire Institute of Art building, because literally now across the street from that parking lot will be a low-income housing development, not a market rate housing development. And so now you're starting to cluster poverty and recovery, and that usually doesn't work out well because, well, let's just be honest, it's a drug dealer's paradise down there. So you're going to have to be really, really careful with what's going on. So a lot of those big housing developments that Joyce Craig is bragging about in her TV commercials for governor have been iced. Hundreds, literally probably more than a quarter of the units that were under development are now off the table, not to be built or not to be built in the foreseeable future, if at all, because, financial landscape changed, and now all of a sudden, somehow in this extremely hot market for housing, the financing doesn't work. So we've started to see this come about, but the idea, look, folks, markets markets go up and they go down. They have boom and they have bust cycles, right? Just when you think affordable housing is out of reach, the market will provide a whole lot of affordable housing. And I could tell you stories about what's happened in this city. In fact, I think I might, because the last time the real estate market collapsed, you might remember that, was what, 2008, somewhere in there? Yeah. You know, entire complexes like Sunset Ridge on Eastern Ave went from being normal market rate housing to being Section 8 development, which means they took federal vouchers for low-income people. And well, how many ever years later it was after that happened? I think that happened in 2012, 2011, 2012, somewhere in there. I'm sitting at a committee meeting of the Board of School Committee where I was where I was listening to the principal of Weston Elementary School tell me all about how she wanted to become a Title I school. And her answer to my question of what happened, I know the neighborhoods that feed that school, she said, well, all of the apartments on Eastern Ave, Sunset Ridge, went Section 8, and they built all that tax credit, AKA low-income housing, government-subsidized housing on Carratzis Ave, and our poverty rate in the school went from 17% to 47% in 3 years. That's what happens, folks. So whenever you've got these leveraged developers that have got to collect rent to pay their bills, what do? Yeah, that's right. When the economy tanks, they become hotel affordable housing because they belly up to the trough and they get money from the government. And when you get money from the government, you got to take the subsidized class. And listen, I did not grow up rich. I am still not a wealthy guy. I have nothing against people who have difficulty making ends meet. I have often been one of them. However, that said, concentrating poverty like that is a disaster demographically for any community, and Manchester has done it over and over and over again. What more can you say about a city where over 60% of the housing is considered low to moderate income by the federal government? There it is. And so the city continues, by the way, to put itself in positions that it shouldn't, and you're going to feel it at budget time. The fire department, we talked about this grant when it first came up. Remember, we're going to apply for it even though we don't know what it says. Well, they got a $3.7 million grant to hire a dozen more firefighters. And Chief Cashin is all excited because it's the first increase in the number of firefighters in more than 20 years. And somehow the city that since the early to mid 90s has been operating with personnel levels per fire unit, right? Whether it's a truck or an engine. All of a sudden, now we need to have 4 people on every piece of equipment instead of the 3 that we've been running with. And that's going to make all the difference in the world. And listen, I get it. The city's grown, but the question really becomes, has the number of calls grown? You know, one thing that we do know is over the years, because of fire sprinklers and all sorts of other regulations, right? There just aren't as many fires as they are anymore, as there used to be. And, if we're going to be honest about how many times the fire trucks go out, 75 to 80% of the time, they're going out to support a 911 call for an ambulance. Okay? It's not for a fire. And so there are some real questions about why you would send $1 million ladder truck out to an ambulance call rather than, listen, remember Emergency 51? I remember watching Emergency 51 in the 70s, don't you? With, I'm gonna draw blanks on their names now. But anyway, yeah, where the paramedics from the firehouse would go, they didn't send out the engine, they didn't send out the truck, they didn't send out the ladder. They sent out the modified pickup truck that had storage compartments for all the stuff that the paramedics would need when they get called to the scene of a medical emergency. I don't get it. Why is it that we think we need to have more people so that we can continue to send out these enormous pieces of very expensive equipment to go to the site of an ambulance call? And they say that they go to the ambulance calls because sometimes they get there first before the ambulance, and sometimes the ambulance people need help. Well, I guess maybe they might wait for the ambulance crews to call if they need help, but now instead of sending 3 people to an ambulance call, we're going to send 4. Now, the trouble with these grants is they all expire. And once they expire, of course, Cashin talking about how amazing it's going to be now that we have these extra 4 people on every shift, or whatever it is, 12, however they're going to break it up, right? They're going to go from 47 to a shift to 50. So I guess it's 4 shifts with an extra 3 people. All right? So, now, when this first came up, he said, well, we'll be able to absorb these 12 people when the grant runs out because of, turnover. People retire, people quit, all that fun. So they'll be able to absorb it through attrition. Do we really think that this $3.7 million is going to go, is not going to be added to the budget once the personnel are hired, right? So what is the justification for this? Sure, he says 4-person crew, they do their tasks 25% faster with a 4-person crew than a 3-person crew. Maybe that's, what documentation do we have about the failures of the Manchester Fire Department to adequately, if not efficiently and effectively, do its job with the staffing the way it has now? What information do we have about what the calls for service are and whether or not it's appropriate for us to respond to those calls for service the way we're responding? We don't ask any of these questions. We just say, oh, great, we have a grant. And now Norm Vincent has got the alderman from Ward 11 has got an item on the agenda saying, hey, you know what, we should hire a grant writer. We keep feeding into this narrative that says we just need more money in the city of Manchester. We don't. I mean, if you accept the premise that we don't have enough money, then I suppose what you should do is spend your time looking for ways to spend more money, okay? Or to find more money to spend. But as someone who's worked in the mayor's office, been an alderman, been on the school board, I can tell you that when you apply for grants, you have to abide by the rules of the grants. I get so frustrated at one point at the school board, I went into the administration, I said, how about we figure out what we want to do and look for grants that support what we want to do, instead of just applying for any grant we can get our hands on so we can twist ourselves into a pretzel trying to change what we do to meet the conditions of the grant. It's not a way to do business. Because what is your ultimate purpose? If your ultimate purpose is just to get grants, well, then I'm sure hiring a grant writer makes a whole lot of sense. But we seem to be pulling the police department, the fire department, we got grants coming in left and right. So now we're going to have a position. I mean, we've looked at grant writer positions over the last 30 years. No one ever felt, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. But we do not have a revenue problem in the city of Manchester. We have a spending problem. And to add to that, now we're going to take ARPA dollars, American Rescue Plan money, $600,000 of it to go buy Angie's Place, which is a shelter. Emily's Place, which is a shelter that the city that's been operating since 1988 and more or less operated by the YWCA with various partners over the years. But now there's a problem. One group took off. The YWCA can't handle it. And so now the city is coming up with money to buy Emily's Place so it can turn it over to a nonprofit. Does the city really belong in the shelter business? I don't know. I guess I don't have issues with the city helping to subsidize the operation. I think we all understand that these places are necessary, but the question becomes, how many times does the city have to step in and spend your tax dollars? And don't tell me ARPA dollars aren't your tax dollars. They are. They just didn't come straight through your property tax. They came through other taxes that you pay to the federal government so you can get a pittance of it back and pretend that it's doing some good. So you've got these added dollars So now we're going to own a shelter. Another one. We can't find somebody to take care of the shelter that we don't want to operate at 39 Beech Street, but we're gonna take on another shelter. But don't you worry, the money just won't stop coming until it does. You really think Chief Cashin is going to say, "Hey, listen, the grant is done. There's no other money coming in. We'll absorb these 12 people happily within our complement through attrition"? Yeah, just like Chief Oldenburg, Well, we lost the grant. We need $1 million to keep those 10 officers on the payroll. Yeah, no, you don't. You have 26 vacancies. You still have 16 to fill if you take, and this is the way it works. And now, of course, what are they? I forget what it is, but they're giving promotions. They're hiring more people, and of course, the police department, which, of course, we have the money in our budget. Of course, you get funded for 10 positions that you didn't need funding for. How's that work? Yeah, that's awesome. By the way, just so you know, to clear up any confusion, Manchester is at least a partial sanctuary city. The police department in the city of Manchester, if it gets a detainer request from ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, if they get a request to retain somebody, they will hold them. However, Manchester does not ask about immigration status when it arrests people for crimes, and Manchester will not turn over people it knows are illegal aliens committing crimes in this city to ICE. We will not proactively notify the feds that we have an illegal who committed a crime so they can be picked up by the feds, but we will, if they ask us to hold on to somebody, we will hold them. So Manchester is 2/3 of the way to being a full sanctuary city with the way it handles its policing, and you should know that. Okay, now, here's the big issue that I want to talk to you about. During the budget, the city projected it was going to get $90 million in state adequacy aid, which was about a $7 or $8 million decrease from the prior year. And the reason for that decrease was a reduction in the number of students, but a serious reduction in the number of students who get free or reduced hot lunch. The state pays us more for every kid on the free and reduced hot lunch program, okay? So now that the state has gone through and it's done its calculations, magically the city of Manchester had many more people than it estimated for free and reduced hot lunch, which is going to result in more than $6.5 million of additional aid coming to the city from the state for the current budget year. Now, this was discussed at the last board meeting, the school board meeting in September, and now it's coming to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And the request, and this, some of this is just phrased so poorly. I wonder if it's just incompetence or it's dishonest. It's just dishonesty. But here is the letter from Mayor Rouet and Sharon Wickens, the finance officer, to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. It says, "This letter serves to advise the BMA that the Manchester School District has available for appropriation in fiscal year 2025 $6,517,315 of revenues in excess of those in the 2025 budget. Pursuant to Section 6.05A of the City Charter, these verified and certified excess revenues may be utilized by the BMA to make a supplemental appropriation to the Manchester School District of $6,517,315 for fiscal 25. It should be noted that any supplemental appropriation must be in accordance with 6.04 of the City Charter regarding notice of a public hearing at least 1 week in advance of the public hearing." So, it's been verified by Sharon Wickens and certified by Mayor J. Rouet. What this letter doesn't say is, while it says that the money may be appropriated, it doesn't say that it may also be given to the taxpayers. Now, a couple of years ago, when $35 million magically fell from the sky in the state budget, the school board came to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and said, hey, $35 million more in adequacy aid fell from the sky. Can we spend it, please? And the Board of Mayor and Aldermen said, sure, here's $35 million. And what did that $35 million get you, the taxpayer? That $35 million got you $13 million in school pay raises in year one of a 3-year cycle. And it got you $20 million in building expenditures. That was 2 budgets ago. In the immediate past budget, it got you another $20 million in spending on this behemoth $306 million plan to renovate and put additions onto the 4 middle schools that already have excess space and declining enrollment, and to build a new Beech Street school. Oh, side note on that, the school board is finally coming to the Lands and Buildings Committee this Tuesday at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to ask it for permission, not just to build over Sheridan Emmett Park a new school, but also to blow up Beech Street School and put a basketball court and a playground there. But that's just a lie, because that's where they want to put the new high school in phase 2. So this will be before the Lands and Buildings Committee, and it will come before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. My guess is that the Republican alderman will say no, the Democrat alderman will say yes, and Mayor Jay Rouet, who's more about optics than anything that makes sense, will put the final nail in phase 1 and give the green light to an $80 million elementary school that we just don't need, and deprive those kids in the center city of the only green space that they have to stretch their legs, play a little ball, or anything else that they do. And then they'll just come back and this, well, we wanted to turn the old Beech Street school site into a playground and a basketball court, but it's really the only place we can build our brand new $476 million high school is on that site. And they've already done 2 site plans. They've already made 2 different presentations on what it would look like. But getting back to this, okay, so the schools now have got, so they got $35 million that got built into the operating budget. Mind you, Jim O'Connell still talks about how little money they have. And that doesn't count the tens of millions of dollars they also got in federal COVID aid, $85 million over 3 years. Yeah. Okay, so you've built that $35 million that is no longer $35 million because it went down and it's still going down, but they built that into the budget for pay raises and debt service on these mammoth building plans, and now comes another $6.5 million. Now remember, they wanted, another $5 million in their budget this year, and Mayor Rouet gave them $1 million. They went from $227 to $228 million. And after that all went through, the cities, the schools said, "Hey, listen, nothing changed. Nothing changed. They didn't reduce a damn thing from what they said they were going to do if they got the extra $4 million that they wanted." Now they're coming back and asking for $6.5 million. Okay, folks, I don't normally encourage you to email or call your alderman, but I think you should on this one. Because, and Mayor Rouet might be particularly persuadable here, since he put out more than a dozen campaign flyers telling everybody how he was going to cut spending, prioritize spending, reduce spending, and finally give you a tax cut. Well, if that $6.5 million isn't given to the schools, then it will show up as a revenue on the city's books. And when the city goes to set the tax rate in November, that $6.5 million will be a direct buy down on the tax rate. In fact, it might be big enough, I haven't had a chance to look at the numbers, but it might be big enough to give you an actual tax cut. And since the schools got $35 million, no questions asked, which they pissed away on pay raises and debt, okay, we're going from $12 million in debt by the end of their programs to over $40 million in debt and annual debt payments. Maybe it's time the taxpayers caught a break, and that $6.5 million that the schools are just going to use to pad their budget, the budget that they had an $8 million surplus on last year, coming into this year, because they couldn't spend it all. Now we're going to give them another 6.5. I say thank you, but no thank you. It's time to put your foot down. I'll let you know when that public hearing is, so you can do what you need to do. I am your ever humble host, Rich Girard. Thanks for tuning in. Until next week, be good, be well, don't do anything we wouldn't do. We're proud to have you in the audience. Thanks so much for being there. Good night.